Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dr. Tim Maggs, and this is the Concerned Parents of Young Athletes Sports Medicine podcast. Just a little background for those who may be joining us the first time. The Concerned Parents of Young Athletes is a program that we developed over 20 years ago, and the goal is to elevate the importance of biomechanics in these young growing bodies. And tonight we're going to go over some very interesting information, so I appreciate you joining us and being a part of this whole thing. We've got news this week. Every week there's news, and some weeks it's more exciting than others, and this one I think is going to be more exciting than we've had in the past. It's about sports exams, and I've talked about this for years, how the kids in this country, middle school, high school athletes, get a medical physical before they start a sports season. We're going to go over that in a little bit more detail with relevant stories. First of all, this past weekend, it was exciting. The local paper, the Daily Gazette, printed an article that I authored on injury prevention begins with youth sports. Now let's kind of get some meat on that bone. What does that mean? Well, at that age, there's so much that can be identified as far as biomechanical faults that is ignored by our current medical sports medicine system. So therefore, nothing is done, and we're a reactive system. So we kind of wait for these imbalanced kids to get hurt, and then they go to doctors that are not familiar with biomechanics. But more importantly, if you are a fan of the NBA and you saw in the last couple of months 3 high-profile players go down with a ruptured Achilles, that's the outcome of ignoring youth athletes and their biomechanical faults. A career of accumulation of stresses and a ruptured Achilles is the straw that breaks the camel's back. So the fix is not to go to the NBA and think that we can do things with those athletes. Yes, a lot has to be done at the NBA level, but it has to start in youth sports. And that's what Sequoia or Concerned Parents is all about. Here's a copy of a local school district and their exam form. And the truth is 95% of it is medical, eyes, ears, nose, and throat. But when you look at it a little closer, you see the left column is the eyes, ears, lymph nodes, thyroid, nose, tonsils, teeth. Now, I'm not saying that's not important, and that's what these doctors should be looking at. That's important. But if you go to that right side, right column, and go down to orthopedic, it says feet, posture, structural. First of all, the docs or the therapists or whoever is doing these exams do not understand musculoskeletal or neuromusculoskeletal. And then there's about a 3-inch line to the right of that they can write anything in there that they want. And I'm not quite sure what it is that they're supposed to look for, but I know I've seen many of these examinations done, and they really don't do much. They look at the next category, scoliosis. Now, scoliosis is, yes, a serious condition, and they talk about it's either positive or negative. And that is the totality of the musculoskeletal that is done on these kids that are going through tests. Now, when you go through as many tests as they have to go through to get approved to be able to play sports, truthfully, there's not one bit of functional or valuable musculoskeletal being done. So I have a patient come in last week, and she said to me, my 13-year-old son just went through his sports physical, and the doctor thinks that he might have a little scoliosis in his mid-back, and she would like us to get x-rays. And I said, listen, I question that because I've had far too many kids come in here with the suggestion that they had scoliosis, and upon x-ray, they don't have scoliosis. So I said, we do our sports exam, sports biomechanics exam, and I wouldn't take x-rays for scoliosis because if there is a little scoliosis, well, probably 90% of the kids out there might have a little scoliosis, but that's not a clinical issue that we have to be concerned with. And I said, secondly, your doctor, probably the only musculoskeletal term that she knows is scoliosis. And after 40 years of being in practice, my experience is they use that term in these sports physicals to make it appear as though they know musculoskeletal. However, they don't know musculoskeletal, and scoliosis is not the concern. It would be picked up on our sports biomechanics test, the structural fingerprint exam, if it were there. So now you have mom worried and said, please just take the x-ray and let me know. Bring Johnny back and let's take the x-ray. So there is the young man who this doctor thought had a little scoliosis. Now, if mom didn't bring him into me, that would be noted in his file. Mom's afraid that his future sports life will be burdened with a diagnosis of scoliosis. We can see that that's the straightest thoracic spine that I've seen in a long time. And the inaccuracy of the evaluation process and the limited knowledge that the examiners of our kids coast to coast is a crisis, because the effects from that exam and the omission of the identifying the information that is available on that exam, the omission is going to have a lifetime of impact and a lifetime of costs. So what are those costs? Well, let's go over the costs of missing that. First of all, the likelihood of injuries. The injuries are going to go way up, terminating in Tyrese Halliburton's ruptured Achilles, because there's not a doubt in my mind, after I've done several thousand structural fingerprint exams, x-rays on every one of them, measuring hip height on every one, knowing the difference on most, knowing the collapse of the feet, that's ignored. There are going to be injuries. So what are the costs of the injuries? Well, how about the psychological stress of a young athlete? And then all the way up to the psychological stress of Tyrese Halliburton in the most crucial game of his life, slamming the floor and now having to sit out an entire year. What is the emotional stress there? What is the pain and suffering? I can't imagine the rupturing your Achilles, going through that surgery, and then going through rehab is a joyride. And all of the injuries that these kids suffer, many of them are due directly to the imbalance in biomechanics, but most of them are due in part to the imbalance of the biomechanics. Premature degeneration. So we've examined literally tens of thousands of people in my career. We x-ray every one of them. At a certain age, the degeneration of the joints occur. And then we see that the right hip is more degenerated than the left hip. And that's because there's an imbalance in that structure that no one ever looked at. And now what's the cost of a degenerated joint in a 37-year-old individual who's got 50 years left? The cost is enormous. What about the pharmaceutical cost? Well, we know that industry is exploding in revenues. What about the surgeries that are out there? My fourth research paper was biomechanics before and after hip replacement, because we've learned after seeing so many people who have had hip replacements that the docs don't even look to see if the hips are level after the surgery. And the thought that a person has one hip or one knee that needs to be replaced should be more than enough convincing that there's an imbalance in the weight distribution and an acceleration of degeneration in one joint on one side of the body. So it's clear that these docs do not look at, nor are they concerned with, the imbalances that lead to those types of costs. How about the quality of life? I deal with it every day. A person reaches an age where you just can't get them out of pain. And now they have to suffer with that pain. They're on meds, they're in pain management, the fastest growing department in healthcare today. The longer we live, the more pain, the more meds. And it's just it's so sad to see, the golden years are really the horrible years because of the degenerative changes, and we haven't gotten the fix for it yet. And people haven't learned. I say in this country, we've been educated wrong. We haven't learned how to preserve our musculoskeletal systems. We've learned how to react. Everything out there is endorsing that. The insurance industry will only pay when you have a diagnosis. Your docs you only go to your docs when you have an injury. So no one is out there telling you this is how to preserve. And so my message and concerned parents of young athletes is it starts at that age. They all have to go through the biomechanical exam with a report of what needs to be done to be able to change those biomechanics, even the weight distribution in that body, and doing the exercises and the treatment on a frequency that will preserve that structure over time, reduce injuries, and dramatically reduce costs. And then the final cost is the dollars and cents. And musculoskeletal is the leading cost in healthcare today for obvious reasons. We cannot afford healthcare. In 2012, I published my book, Fixing the Healthcare Crisis, and it has to do with the fact that you have to fix musculoskeletal, change the whole paradigm of musculoskeletal, because the more we can keep people active, the better weight control, heart disease, diabetes, cancers, arthritis, all of those costly conditions, the costs will go down if we can keep people active. So that's what we have to do, okay? And those are the costs that concerned parents of young athletes are looking to help with. Here is our diagram of every human being. It starts with the collapse of the feet, the increased Q angle of that right knee, which is necessary for the body to find balance, the lower right hip, and the lower left shoulder. From top to bottom, virtually every joint is under abnormal loading. Tendons, muscles, discs in the back, meniscus in the knees, hip joints. This is every kid, middle school, high school kid in our country. Every one of them have these imbalances. I know I have the largest database of biomechanical x-rays on the middle and high school athlete population, probably in the world. I know. And they all have it. And we're ignoring it. We're not looking at it. And until we can just accept the fact that, okay, there's a better way, we are going to continue with this condition that we have. Here's a real life condition. You can see that left foot is collapsed more. Left knee rotates in. If you look at the left quadricep muscle, it's not engaged. The shorts are crooked, which means the hips are probably crooked. And the upper body is only going to compensate to balance the body from this. So we know that this is a problem, but again, nowhere in our healthcare system does anyone look at that. So now we do the structural fingerprint exam. We've done tens of thousands of them. Not one human is fully balanced. Some are mildly imbalanced. Some are majorly imbalanced. But the exam needs to be done, and it needs to be done, a version of it every year to monitor, because another fact that virtually no one knows, but I do because we've x-rayed so many of these kids, their legs don't grow evenly. So when there's a growth spurt, you have to look at the difference in their hip heights because they don't grow evenly. And there's ways we accommodate for the change in hip height, which I'll show you. But the structural fingerprint exam is today the only biomechanical exam that is done in large scale in the country. We need more doctors doing it. We need coaches and parents stepping up and seeing to it that their kids get them. So now let's go back to our young man that supposedly had scoliosis. One of the measurements that we take is hip height while barefoot. He's 4.6 millimeters off. 3 and below is normal. Above 3, that's abnormal. So we're going to now move forward, and I'll show you what we do in this situation. His side view x-ray, if you look at that long red line, that's his center of gravity. If you look at the short red line, that's where it should be going. So the center of gravity is forward of where it should be going. And what that means is that the weight bearing in this body is going through areas that are not designed to handle the weight bearing. And therefore, this young man is predisposed to very specific injuries that we know the injuries will occur. If he has injuries, these are the injuries that will occur with that biomechanical makeup. Now, there are conditions that are common in middle school, high school athletes, like stress reactions, stress fractures in the low back. This biomechanical pattern predisposes this young man to that condition. Now, there are treatments and exercises that will mitigate his chances of having that condition occur, which means he gets to stay in sports, which means he doesn't become a cost, the emotional, financial, and physical cost of being injured. So that's one of the findings. Now, in moving forward, this is why I've developed the Dr. Mag's Feet First system, and we've done many podcasts on this. Our fifth study, 1,001 people, we did digital laser foot scans on, and the conclusion was that every human has varying degrees of collapse of the feet, and that the feet continue collapsing throughout the course of their lifetime. So the goal is deal with the feet first. It's the foundation of the body. So we need orthotics for the feet, and that's what we've come up with. Over-the-counter, high-quality orthotics. We're no longer selling them online. We have a period of time. We will not be selling them online. This is for all patients that can come to our office. However, you do not need our orthotics. You need a quality orthotic that can create symmetry and support of the feet. Step one in dealing with every one of these kids. So we put the orthotics in this young man's shoes, retake the x-ray. He's still he's 4.5, still exceeds the number that is optimal, and therefore we're going to put a lift under the orthotic on the low hip side to level the hips. So when you fix the feet, level the hips, now all of the centers of gravity inherently are going to improve, but we still want to set the young man up on a treatment program of chiropractic adjustments, cold laser therapy if there's any strains, sprains, inflammatory issues that are going on, and a physical therapy exercise program to try to re-educate the muscles that control the body and create better symmetry of the muscles. And that's something that we want the young man to do ongoing. And then periodically, at least every year, we'll reevaluate to see what the structure's doing, what new traumas have occurred, what do we have to do healing-wise to keep that structure healthy and moving forward. So if you look to the left, there's our young man with the collapse. If you look to the right, we put orthotics in his shoes, and you can see a global difference. Now, let me be clear on this point. This does not occur with everyone. This occurs 42% of the time, or maybe even less. This young man, it happened to occur, and that's wonderful. But it's mandatory that once you put orthotics in the shoes, you have to retake the x-ray of the hips, because in the worst case scenario, 22% of the time, the hip heights get worse. And that's that individual biomechanics, structural fingerprint. So that post x-ray is mandatory. You cannot just put orthotics in their shoes and think that everyone is getting better. Go to the first study on our website, and you'll see there are 5 different biomechanical types, and you have to take that post x-ray. And if those hips are more than 3 millimeters apart, then you have to put a lift on that shoe underneath the orthotic on the low hip side. So we've got a lot of work to do. We're going to have a weekly podcast coming out to you. I'm so excited because I've been part of this movement for the last 21 years, and we're making great strides. So many kids have been helped. Every year, though, we have all new recruits coming in, and we need teachers, parents, coaches, administrators, and politicians in the community working to make this the norm. And keep in mind, Dr. Bennett Amalu, a Nigerian pathologist, single-handedly went up against the NFL and he beat them. And that's why we have concussion protocols in every organization, in every sport, at every level today. It's mandatory. Well, that's, from the neck up. My protocols are from the neck down. I want the same level of importance put on these protocols so that we can begin to address the biomechanical faults before injuries occur and teach young athletes how to preserve their structures to reduce the costs of the future and to improve their quality of life. It's going to take a lot of work, but I'm excited. I hope you are. And again, join forces. Let us know how you can help. I'll be back each week. Thanks.